Johann Sebastian Bach is one of the most famous composers to ever live. But did you know that he didn't compose classical music? Sure, he made classical music, but not classical music. The word classical has different meanings, depending on if the C is capitalized or not. Let's explore what we mean when we say lowercase c classical music. Don't worry, we'll talk about the uppercase C definition in another Classical Bean episode. So don't forget to subscribe to know when that comes out. There are two general definitions of classical music. One with an uppercase C and one with a lowercase c. In this video, we're talking about classical music with a lowercase c, which is the brother of the two. When most people think of classical music, they think of the lowercase c type of it. You might think, essentially, of music in a concert hall. You'd have to dress up to go to a classical concert, and the people playing the music would be dressed all in black. You might think of something like this. Or this. Or this. Or this. These all sound very, very different, but they're all lowercase c classical music. Why is that? Because there are different kinds of classical music. Some of the well-known ones are Baroque, Romantic, Modern, Postmodern, and Classical, with a capital C. So yes, classical music is a kind of classical music. All of these words define different eras in classical music, or what we might think of classical music's subgenres. Take rock music, for example. Rock music also breaks into subgenres, like punk rock and rock and roll, but all of its subgenres share some of the same overall rock characteristics. It's similar in classical music. Each era shares some of the same overall characteristics, but expresses them differently. Let's start with the Baroque. The Baroque era lasted roughly from 1600 to 1750, and it was characterized by music with multiple instrumental or human voices singing at the same time. Listen to how the first harpsichord voice is joined by the second one. They both sing the same theme. This is called polyphony. Some well-known composers from this era are Johann Pachelbel, Henry Purcell, Antonio Vivaldi, Domenico Scarlatti, and Georg Friedrich Händel. But perhaps the most famous one was Johann Sebastian Bach. In fact, he was so instrumental in shaping the period that his death in 1750 is commonly used to mark the end of the Baroque era. After that, there's the capital C classical era, which lasted roughly from 1750 to 1830. We moved away from polyphony from the Baroque era towards homophony, meaning a single voice at a time, usually with accompaniment, which sounds like this. The music of the classical era revolved around a limited number of related chords. You might have heard these names from this time period: Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. There's some debate about when exactly the Romantic era began, but most musicologists agree it was somewhere around 1800, when Beethoven began to expand the classical music style and write more and more emotionally driven music. The Romantic era lasted to about 1900. Franz Schubert, Niccolò Paganini, Robert Schumann, Frédéric Chopin, Franz Liszt, Johannes Brahms, and Gustav Mahler were some influential composers during this period. The Romantic era was characterized by long melodies with intense emotions and dramatic changes in dynamics. Take this clip from Brahms' Hungarian Dance No. 5, for example. Next, there's the modern era, where we find composers like Arnold Schoenberg, Maurice Ravel, Béla Bartók, Igor Stravinsky, Heitor Villa-Lobos, Dmitri Shostakovich, and Sergei Prokofiev. Their music has increasing amounts of dissonance, or notes that sound a bit odd together, and has irregular rhythms like this. Or this. The modern era started at the turn of the 20th century and lasted until the middle of the century, when postmodern era emerged. During the postmodern era, experimental music really took off, inspired by a movement against materialism and conformity. John Cage is perhaps the best-known composer from this era, and his compositions beg the question, what is music? For Cage, music was any sound we experience. Here's a clip from one of his pieces called Water Walk, in which he throws radios into a bathtub. And here's a clip from another of his pieces, titled 433, which is named for its duration. Take a listen. Now tell us, do you have a favorite era of lowercase c classical music? Why is that one your favorite? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our video on the uppercase C definition of classical music.